Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, and it's always nice to review the new beers from them when I come back to the motherland. They're one of the most highly regarded breweries in Scotland and they are one of my personal favourites as well. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've not had from them before, although I know they've done some really nice examples within this particular group of beers, I guess we could say. So curious to see what this one has in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to Galashiels in the Scottish Borders region, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Tempest Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Cold Wave. It comes in at 4.8% ABV, and this one is a Pilsner. So yeah, very first Pilsner that I've tried from Tempest Brewing Company before, but we have in recent times had their Modern Helles, which is one of their core range beers, and I thought that one was very nicely done in fact. So on that basis, I do have quite high hopes for the Pilsner, because this is also a lager beer actually, and they showed quite clearly that they know what they're doing when it comes to making lagers. So let's just see how we get on with this one then. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tempest Brewing Company before, and you will no doubt see me add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I am back home in the motherland of Scotland for a little while. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Tempest Brewery once again then. So, Tempest Brewery, as I've mentioned to you before, was founded back in 2010 by Gavin and Anika Meiklejohn. So Anika trained as a chef in New Zealand, but the couple returned to Scotland in 2007 to run the Cobbles Bar down in Kelso together. But Gavin actually had quite an interesting background in beer, so he had previously worked for the Whistler Brewing Company in British Columbia over in Canada, and so he had an appreciation for craft beer and had taken brewing courses in Sydney and Australia, and he actually homebrewed in his garage in Wellington in New Zealand as well, using a 50-litre kit brewery, and this was where he developed quite a few recipes in fact. And as we know, Wellington in New Zealand is a very good beer city. But Gavin is joined at the brewery by Alan Rice, who acts as the business development manager, and he'd previously worked with Stewart Brewery, who are in Lonehead just to the south of Edinburgh, but he had also lived in New Zealand and Australia. But the brewery was previously housed in old dairy buildings in Kelso, and this brewery was largely kind of homemade and kind of it was just engineered to produce big beers on a really kind of shoestring budget. But their beers in the early days proved to be very popular, and so they quickly outgrew this facility and had to move to their current and bigger home in the Tweedbank Industrial Estate in Galashiels. In June of 2019, they submitted plans to build a new brewery and building with bar and restaurant on the site of the former Eldon Mill, which is very close to the Tweedbank railway station, at the new Scottish Borders Railway as they're calling it. So that is still in progress from what I understand, but hopefully we can go down and visit that at some point in the near future. That's definitely an out and about video that I want to film for you. But as of November 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 125 different kinds of beer. They've done a good number of different styles, but probably my personal favourites from them would be the Brave New World, which is a lovely old school West Coast IPA. There's also the Marmalade on Rye, which is a big orangey leaning West Coast double IPA with some kind of rye bready notes to it. And I also like the Old Parochial as well. That's a lovely beer. And recently, Modern Helles I really liked as well. If that was a little bit more readily available, that would definitely become something of a go-to, I would say. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Tempest Brewing Company for the moment. These guys are a very solid all-round brewery in my experience, and as I mentioned to you earlier, one of my personal favourites, and it's always nice to review their new beers when I make it back to the motherland. So yeah, that's everything for your history section in this video. If you want to learn a little bit more about the brewery, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's see how we go with this one then. So a little quick look at the artwork for you on this one before we open it up. It actually looks like it's a kind of icy lake and it's a flare or something like that that's going off there, or a smoke grenade, something like that. But yeah, there you can see it, Tempest Brewing Company, Cold Wave. They also use this symbol, which you'll find on the back of the can, the lightning bolt T, in the pint glass, which is cool, and it tells you a little bit about the beer as well. So it says, let the cold wave crash into you. This is an awakening amid the seas of monolithic yellow beer. Occasionally a new wave will break, a wave of hop forward, citrusy, unpasteurized and refined dry hop Pilsner made from Neu German hops and a custom spec local grain. This is that wave, this is that Pilsner. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's got a Scottish malt base in it actually. But just to tell you about the beer itself, this one has Hull Melon and Hallertau Blanc in it. So Hull Melon comes in about 8% alpha acid, usually gives you a big melony note, hence the name, but it can also give you a wee bit of a strawberry character as well. And then Hallertau Blanc comes in about 11% alpha acid, and it's quite similar actually in flavour to Nelson Sauvin. It gives you that big kind of white, green, grapey, gooseberry type flavour actually. So yeah, both very, very nice hops in my experience. So quite curious to see a kind of new generation hop Pilsner, this one actually. But the malt base in this one is Golden Promise, and there's also some wheat in there as well. So yeah, this I think could be quite interesting. In fact, 440ml can, and I believe I bought this one at Beer Hive through in Edinburgh. This one has been in my fridge for a couple of weeks, and I just was in the mood for a lager, so I thought I would crack this one open. We reviewed another Tempest beer just a few videos back, but I just wanted to have a go at this. Lagers don't last in my fridge very long. I always enjoy a little bit of a lager. I can't remember how much I paid for this beer. I think it might have been somewhere in the region of £3.50, so that is roughly €4, 40 Swedish kroner, and I guess somewhere in the region like $5 American, something like that. But yeah, Cold Wave, 4.8% dry hop Pilsner with Hallertau Blanc and Nelson Sauvin. So yeah, let's get this guy out and well, not Nelson Sauvin, Hull Melon. I'm telling you the wrong thing, guys, my apologies. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. That would make for an interesting Pilsner though, Hallertau Blanc and Nelson Sauvin. Maybe a homebrewing idea for the future, we'll need to see. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and just see how we go. Yeah, I think we'll put the last little bit in later just to get a wee bit ahead before we actually drink the thing. But yeah, there we go. So anyway, before the head disappears on this one, you can see that this beer has poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head, but that is fading away to be a really nice kind of thin foamy layer. Round the edge of the glass, there's a nice kind of thicker foamy ring sitting there. But yeah, that is just fading away to be a really kind of thin foamy layer. But one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty damn nice actually. There's a few little bit of sediment particles floating about, and I think my fridge is maybe being a little bit cold for this one. But yeah, there is a little bit of that sediment just floating around in this one. I'm not sure how long ago this beer was released. I think it might have been out for like a month or two, but you know, with a Pilsner usually that will still be okay. But as you can see, this beer's poured a lovely kind of bright straw golden yellow kind of colour. It's got a little bit of a natural haze to it, you know, that unfiltered kind of thing. But yeah, it certainly looks the part. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on, one, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. And when this has got Golden Promise and I guess it's a local wheat strain that's in it, then it kind of makes sense that this is a really bright yellow. But the longer that you boil the wort, the more the sugars will caramelise, and thus you'll also get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put into the beer will also play a role in determining the colour of the beer, but other than that, there's nothing really you need to care about. But those latter two variables you only really need to give thought to when you're doing like sour beers and stuff like this. So overall, it actually looks a little bit more like a kind of Keller beer than a Pilsner in my experience. You can get the kind of naturally hazy ones like this, but yeah, quite often that's like a Keller Pils in my experience. But yeah, nothing wrong with it being a wee bit hazy, especially when it does have a little bit of wheat in it. But nothing particularly untoward about the appearance of this one. It does look a little bit more like a Keller Pils, as we said. Not too much carbonation visible, but yeah, looks the part. So let's have a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Very curious about this beer. Nothing else about the appearance we need to say, I think. Now, I'm going to say that does smell quite nice actually. It smells quite different from the other kind of Pilsners I've had in recent times, but still quite an interesting one. So, yeah, what I'll say straight up, just as a basic overview of this beer, you can smell a little bit of the kind of wheaty breadiness out of this one, so it's a little bit more bready than some lagers that I've had in recent times, or Pilsners to be precise. But it also has a nice kind of oily, fruity character to it, and the green component I don't find overly pungent in this one. But yeah, it's saying that it's dry hop, so that would make sense, to be honest with you, because remember, when you tend to get big green components like that, it tends to be from early addition hopping. So remember, early addition hopping is the one that gives you the bitterness early on in the wort boil. Late addition hopping within the last half hour is the one that gives you a little bit of bitterness, but quite a lot of flavour and aroma. Then dry hopping comes after the wort boil. That gives you all flavour and aroma, basically. So yeah, this one is quite a big oily. It's quite a big oily. It's got a good degree of sweet malt to it as well, but also a wee bit of a kind of, it's got quite an oily green component too. So I do like how that goes together in this beer. Just a big oily lager beer, this one actually. So that is quite interesting. But let's break the aroma down for you a little bit more and describe it a wee bit more kind of in depth. So on the malty side of things then, the backbone of the beer for me, there is a little bit of that, there is a little bit of that kind of white bready, you know, fresh hedgehog bread crust type roll in it, but you've also got a good bit of white bread in there, and I think that'll be coming from the Golden Promise to a degree. So the bread crust and the a little bit of the white bread will be due to the Golden Promise, but the wheat is also going to kind of thicken that out a wee bit. The one thing I would say that this beer doesn't really have is that kind of big crispness and sort of dry smell to the aroma that you often expect from a Pilsner, and if it doesn't have Pilsner malt in it, that's quite an unusual thing for a Pilsner. Now remember, this style of beer originated in the Czech city, or what is now the Czech city of Pilsen, in Moravia in the Western Czech Republic. I guess you could say kind of southern Czech Republic as well. But yeah, it's our southwest. But anyway, it was created by a German brewer, and he wasn't a very popular guy, but that was the world's first Pilsner. Today it's known as Pilsner Urquell or Plzeňský Pastroj in Czech. But yeah, the Pilsner beers really characterise themselves with that kind of crispness. The Czech variants that you'll find today tend to be a little bit more kind of yeasty and bready, whereas the German ones tend to be a little bit drier and more crisp. So maybe they're going for something that's a little bit more kind of a little bit more Czech leaning, if that makes sense. So we need to see what the yeasty character does. But yeah, backbone of this is a little bit of bread crust, a nice smooth white bready character, and you certainly do get, there's a little touch of like a Werther's Original kind of butter candy, butterscotchy thing to this, but you've also got some really nice biscuity characteristics coming out of this beer as well. So yeah, the malty side of this beer, it's quite straight shooting, but definitely leaning towards that bready end of the spectrum for sure. I really like what this one is. I really like how this one is doing its thing. So yeah, malty wise and yeasty wise, it's definitely a bit more kind of bready and things. There's maybe one or two little crackery, like a Jacob's cream cracker type aroma coming out of this one too. But yeah, let's have a look at the hoppy side of the beer then, just to see how we go. I don't think we really need to say anything else about the malty side of it, right enough. So on the hoppy side of things, there is a little bit of that light earthiness which you would expect from German hops, be they noble or Neu hops, I guess. But yeah, there is a little bit of that kind of smooth and quite bright earthiness in there. There's a bit of floral aromaticity, but it strikes me as being a kind of wet floral aromaticity and almost slightly oil. Not overly pungent, definitely not. Yeah. Yeah, definitely not overly pungent for sure, but yeah, the green component there, it does have a wee bit of a kind of, it does have a little touch of an almost spiciness to it, but like I say, it's quite an oily, wet floral aromaticity, wee bit of smooth but bright earthiness, then also a little bit of a kind of lighter, grassy character coming out of this beer as well. So I really like actually how this one goes about its business in that particular regard. So yeah, green component gets a thumbs up from me as well. Now the fruity side of this beer is, I think, where this is at its most interesting, but if you know these hops, it is what you'd expect, to be honest with you. So the fruity side of this beer, as I say, I never mentioned the grassiness, I'm forgetting about that. Brain's going all over the place in this video. But yeah, the grassiness you get out of this one, again, it's quite oily, but there is a wee bit of zest in there. But behind that, you get this sort of lemon-limey type character. I think there is a wee bit of that lemon-limey fruity note to this one, but there's a lot of big, kind of gooseberry type notes, and also a bit of a big kind of oily melon coming out of the beer as well. So I really like how that it goes about its business in this particular beer too. So yeah, interesting things going on in this one actually. But yeah, aroma wise, this beer from the fruity side of things I think is very, very nice. Yeah, on the on that fruity side, it is definitely, it's a big gooseberry, white, green, grapey sort of note out of it, quite like Nelson Sauvin. That's the Hallertau Blanc, and behind that you get the slightly stronger but still quite oily melon. And I think there's a wee bit of a lemon-limey character to this one as well, mixing in with the grassy side of the beer. I don't get, sometimes with your melon you can get a little bit of a sort of candied strawberry in there. There maybe is a little teeny touch of that, but that's very, very minimal for sure. But aroma wise, I think this one is pretty nice. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we had a taste of this one. So yeah, let's go for it then. So this one is the Cold Wave, a Pilsner coming in at 4.8% ABV from Tempest Brewing Company in Galashiels in the Scottish Borders region. Really looking forward to this. Sláinte, skål, and cheers. Yeah, that's quite interesting. First impression of this one is that it's a big sort of oily and it's quite slick lager beer actually. If I was tasting this blind, I would probably think that this was I think I would definitely pick up it was a lager, I'm pretty sure, but I wouldn't think straight away that this was a Pilsner. And again, this is the thing as I'm saying to you, I think to have a Pilsner, you really need a little bit of Pilsner malt in it, and this one doesn't have that. So it's quite an unusual move. You know, I think if there was a local Scottish Pilsner malt, put that in there and just give the beer that wee bit more crispness. And I mean, generally speaking, as a lager beer, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you're going to call it a Pilsner, I think you've got to have that kind of crisp dryness there. So I think compared to some of the other beers that we've had from Tempest in the past, this one maybe hasn't been given the most accurate style description. I think that's fair to say. So probably technically speaking, without the Pilsner malt, you've got to call this a Helles or a Czech Svetli or something like that. But whatever it is a nice lager beer, and you're not going, in my experience, you're not going to get a bad beer from Tempest. So yeah. Yeah. I mean, you do get a little bit of a kind of crisp bite to this one if you take a big gulp of it, as I did there. But still, it's quite oily and almost sweet the further into the aftertaste you go. So yeah, that's something you would expect a wee bit more of a Helles rather than a it is something you'd expect a wee bit more of a Helles rather than a Pilsner, actually. But yeah, I mean, I do like this one, don't get me wrong on that, but stylistically, with it being called a Pilsner, I'm questioning that a bit, actually. So yeah, make of that what you will. But let's go in. I would say overall it's quite a light, slick, and just easily drinkable beer, this one. But I think it's one of these ones where the flavour reflects the aroma quite well, actually. It's one of these ones where the flavour and the aroma they do link together very well. So, on the malty side of things, then we'll break the beer down as we always do. So, on the malty side of things, backbone of this beer, it's got a lovely kind of how would we say? You can feel there is a wee bit of that kind of bread crusty character there across the middle and the back third of your palate. So that just kind of lingers there, and that's the golden promise. Pretty sure about that. So yeah, nice golden promise. Bread crusty backbone there. On top of that, you can feel a kind of crisp layer of like fresh white bread. We'll focus on the middle third of your palate now. So bread crust, quite a light thin layer of crisp white bread, and then on top of that you've got a slightly thicker layer of you have got a nice kind of thicker wheaty kind of layer to this one. You can feel the wheat just thickening out the beer a bit, and it's interesting because the wheat does give you a little bit of bite in this beer, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So yeah, it does have the kind of lightness of the malt base that you'd expect, but you just don't get the dryness, the really crisp dryness of the Pilsner malt, actually. So that's interesting. But it's the other thing about this is that the golden promise is giving you a little bit of it is giving you a little bit of you know, a kind of two-layered approach. It's almost as if you've got the bread crusty backbone, the crisp white bread, then the thicker wheaty white bread in there, then on top of that you're starting to get the sweetness. So in the middle of your palate you do have like a little circle there, and you can feel a wee touch of that kind of Werther's Original sort of thing coming out of the beer. So yeah, a nice little bit of a nice bit of a Werther's Original type sweetness in there, just forming the base of that circle I was talking about. And on top of that, as you go into the dead centre of your palate, there maybe is a little bit of a straight up sweet caramel in there. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of straight up sweet caramel, some kind of Werther's Original type qualities underneath it, and then as you go out towards the edge of your palate, you've got a bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, that goes together quite nicely, actually. So yeah, the beer does have the kind of sweeter side of things that you'd expect from a Pilsner and the biscuity notes, but the kind of Werther's Originally type note from the Golden Promise is something that you'd more get in a New England IPA. And then as you go towards the back of that middle third of your palate, you just don't get the kind of crispness, that sort of crisp dryness from the Pilsner malt that you'd normally expect from the style. And as I say, don't get me wrong, this is a nice beer, but it's just not that true to the Pilsner style, because like I say, even the Czech ones that you get are a bit more yeasty and bready and smooth, but the German ones are a little bit kind of crisper and dry. But even then, the Czech ones will give you a little bit more crisp. They'll give you a bit of that crispness towards the back of the middle third of your palate. So yeah, just bear that in mind, actually. That is worth bearing in mind. So on the back third of your palate, then we'll have a look at that now. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up there. So a nice wee bit of a kind of bread crusty, bready build up. Towards the back, as you go down onto the base layer of that back third of your palate, there's a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing, and it gets a little bit grainier the further back on the further back on the palate you go. So that's quite nice there. On top of that, you've got a little bit more of a kind of crisp white bready layer to it again. Now you can feel that's a little bit thicker and a wee bit drier the further back on the palate that you go. But on top of that, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of thicker wheaty layer there, and then you can feel towards the very back of the palate that you have got quite a nice kind of just bitiness out of the wheat, which I think is quite cool. But the wheat in this one is a little bit different because it's a little bit smoother the further forward on the palate you go, but a bit bitier the further back on the palate that you go. So yeah, wheat can be very, very unique in the way that it goes about its business sometimes, actually. So that's also worth bearing in mind. So yeah, look, I've quite a few things that are food for thought when it comes to this particular beer. So, on top of that though, on top of the wheaty layer, you do get a little bit of the yeasty character out of the beer, and it's kind of interesting because the yeasty notes that I get out of this one, it's almost like a kind of oily, doughy, yeasty note that you get out of this, and it's actually quite sweet in some ways, so you almost get that slightly kind of corny, bready sweetness mixing in with the yeasty character that sits on top of the wheaty layer there. So yeah, that's quite quirky and quite unusual, I have to say. But at the back of your palate, on that back third of your palate, you can feel that the flavour is a good little bit taller. So you can feel that as you come further forward, but then as you move into the middle third of your palate, you can feel the flavour just condenses down and squashes together a little bit. Then the flavours are a wee bit more condensed in that middle third of your palate. So yeah, I like how that goes together, absolutely. But on the hoppy side of things, then I think we've said everything we need to about the malty side of the beer. Back corners of the palate, again, you get a little bit of that kind of quite bright but smooth earthiness that you would expect of German hops, be they lighter and noble or new and noble. But yeah, as you come further forward, the beer, its green component is actually a little bit more kind of pungent in the flavour than I expected it was going to be. It still has that nice kind of oily, smooth floral aromaticity, but yeah, a wee bit of a kind of grassy, a bit of that kind of bright, grassy floral character to it, and then round the front curve of the palate, it's a bit lighter and more. It is a wee bit lighter and more kind of grassy and zesty as well. But yeah, you've got that nice kind of freshly cut grassy sort of thing coming out of it too. But yeah, it really gets a little bit zestier the further you go into the aftertaste, and I do appreciate that about this beer. But let's look at the fruity part of it then, because I think the fruity part is the most interesting thing with this beer. So the fruity side of the beer, and with the front third of your palate, so border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again there's a little bit of a bread crusty build up. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more it is a wee bit more kind of, I would say, just like white bread, and then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So on the back half of that front third of your palate, you're getting the melon from the whole melon. It's a little bit more kind of pungent, and it gives you a little bit of that dry character, but then as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, you're definitely getting the big kind of gooseberry, white green grapey notes from the Hallertau Blanc, absolutely. And as you reach the kind of front tip of your tongue, there's definitely a wee bit of a more kind of limey character to this beer as well. So yeah, there is a wee bit of lemon limey kind of thing to it in the front tip of the palate, but yeah, mainly white green grape and gooseberry on the front half of the front third, and then the more pungent melon sitting a bit further back from that. But yeah, I think this beer goes about its business very nicely, actually. As I say, I think this is a good beer, but it's just not quite a Pilsner. It's too oily and doesn't have the crispness to be a Pilsner, or the kind of more yeasty creaminess you get from the Czech Pilsens. So yeah, I'd criticise the style label on this one, but the beer itself I like. So I think that sums up the flavour quite nicely. But let's just round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So for me, this is at the top end of light-bodied, and it's quite, for a Pilsner, if we are going to consider it as a Pilsner, it's definitely one of the thicker and oily and I would say less carbonated ones, actually. The carbonation in this one is very, very smooth, so quite an oily, slick beer, this, rather than anything else. But yeah, I think in terms of IBUs, I think this is a fairly standard 20 IBU beer. There's not a lot of bitterness to this one, and there is a wee bit in the aftertaste, but as I say, not a lot. The malty backbone of this one has a wee bit of graininess to it, a bit of smoothness, and also a little bit of sweetness, and then you've got that nice big oily fruity character to this one. There is a wee bit of dryness in there, but yeah, quite an oily sweet character for this one. So yeah, a very nice as I say, a very nice oily lager beer, this one, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. But as I say, not quite true to the Pilsner style in my experience. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this is the Cold Wave, a 4.8% dry hop Pilsner, although I would argue it's a bit more of a Helles than anything else, from Tempest Brewing Company in Galashiels down in the Scottish borders. Another nice beer, but not the most true to style one we've had from them, I would say. So yeah, shows off the Huell Melon and Hallertau Blanc hops quite nicely, actually. So yeah, I think you should give this a go and see what you think. But once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tempest Brewing Company, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the near future. Check out my social media, check out Tempest social media, and I'll see you guys on the next one. We will review another Tempest beer pretty soon, I'm sure. Slange it, skull, and cheers.